is what they had to say. Let's check it out.
Every time I see a fat white woman, I think to myself, I know there's a play about you.
And I know if I came on this app and a white woman came on here and said, if I saw a fat black woman and then went with a stereotype, y'all would be in an uproar on this app, but for some reason you think it's okay when you do it. This is what I don't get about stereotypes. Some people will speak about stereotypes and think it's okay, but once that stereotype is about you and your culture, all of a sudden you're in an uproar. So you're telling me that you can speak about other people, but then you get your panties in a bunch when other people speak about you. This is the same thing that happened when we were kids, talking about if you can throw a punch, you can take a punch. Some of you can't take a punch. Some of you cannot take a punch, and all of a sudden now you the victim, but you've been on this app since 2020 saying the most ignorant, stereotypical things, but all of a sudden when someone want to fight back because they're like, well, if they can do it, I can do it, all of a sudden you got an issue with it. All of a sudden you're going to talk about, well, we been blah. You got to pick a side. It's either everybody can do it or nobody can do it, but you can't just pick and choose who and can't do it.
That's a pretty good point there. I think that's pretty fair. You know, I do think that there are a lot of things that like, oh, you can't say that, right? You can express dislike. For example, I've said this before, when I see like the Pop the Balloon show, one thing I've always noticed personally is if you have like a black, like the majority of people there are black who are participating in the dating show, and you have a black woman come up and she's darker skinned, and you have a couple of lighter dudes there of lighter complexion, she can look at the guys and say, oh, I popped their balloons, right? The lighter complexion dudes, because you're too light for me, right? But if she was to be light skinned and they were darker and she said, you're too dark for me, that would be a problem. But even worse, if the women there were to be darker skinned and he was light skinned and he came up and said, oh, you are too dark for me, that's like, you can't have that preference. I mean, you actually can't have that preference, or you can't speak that you have that preference based on feelings. But we know people have those preferences. We know there are people who prefer people who are actually darker.